Night, November 29, 1944. South of Japan, the sea looked like polished glass. No moon, no wind, just darkness. Sliding beneath it was Sheena No, 70,000 tons of armor and certainty. A skyscraper laid on its side and sent to sea unfinished yet hailed as unsinkable. 18 hours out, 4 dull booms climbed through her hull. Lights died, pumps froze, water found seams men swore didn't exist. Pride met pressure, and pressure doesn't blink. By dawn, the largest carrier Japan ever built would be a rumor on the waves. How do giants drown so fast? Stay to the end to see why. And subscribe for more untold turning points from the Pacific. In June 1942, Japan's illusion of naval invincibility shattered in a single day. At Midway, 4 of the Imperial Navy's frontline carriers, Akagi Kaga, Soryu and Hiro, were lost to American dive bombers in a fiery sequence that turned the Pacific War upside down. The destruction wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Hundreds of elite pilots perished, men who couldn't be replaced. The carefully trained air arm that had struck Pearl Harbor was gone, and Japan's admirals were suddenly staring at a fleet without its wings. For the first time since the war began, silence fell over Tokyo's war rooms. The empire had been outmaneuvered, outproduced, and outplanned. And in that silence came a question no one dared to speak aloud. Could Japan ever recover its balance at sea? The answer, whispered in the corridors of the Naval General Staff, was both pride and denial. "We will build something greater," one admiral said. "Something the Americans cannot sink." It was not strategy. It was symbolism. In the aftermath of disaster, Japan's leadership convinced itself that morale could be restored through spectacle. Engineers were summoned to Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, where the unfinished hull of a Yamato-class battleship sat idle. The order converted into a new type of warship, one that would blend the strength of a battleship with the reach of an aircraft carrier. Its purpose was simple: to prove that Japan's craftsmanship and spirit could still defy American industry. The ship would be named Sheena No, after the ancient province known as the Heart of Japan. It wasn't just a name. It was a statement. She would be massive, 70,000 tons, double the size of any American carrier. Her armor would be nearly impenetrable, her decks reinforced with steel instead of wood. She would carry over 100 aircraft, serve as a floating repair base, and be so heavily protected that no torpedo could bring her down. But beneath the engineering blueprints lay a deeper truth. The Sheena No wasn't born from confidence. It was born from fear. Fear that Japan could never keep pace with the United States' assembly lines. While American shipyards launched a new carrier every few weeks, Japan's workers struggled to finish even one. Sheena No became less a warship and more a prayer cast in steel. A final attempt to prove that willpower could defeat mathematics. The men who hammered her hull worked in near darkness under air raid alerts, welding sparks dancing like fireflies against armor plating. One worker later recalled, "We built her as if the war depended on her alone." And in a sense, it did. Yet with every rivet, Japan was building not salvation, but the illusion of it. For all her strength on paper, Sheena No was already haunted by the ghosts of Midway. The battle that showed the world how quickly giants could fall. The plans for Sheena No read like the blueprint of defiance. Her hull, repurposed from the unfinished 3rd Yamato-class battleship, was to be an engineering miracle. An aircraft carrier so vast and so armored that no weapon afloat could bring her down. She would measure 872 feet in length with armor belts up to 7.5 in thick, and a hardened steel flight deck designed to shrug off direct bomb hits. Her hangars would store over 100 aircraft, plus thousands of tons of fuel, spare parts, and ammunition. She wasn't merely a warship. She was meant to be a floating fortress, a repair base for Japan's remaining carriers. capable of refueling and rearming them at sea. Every rivet driven into her hull echoed Japan's desperation. Inside Yokosuka's shipyards, engineers worked without rest, some sleeping beneath scaffolds, others welding by the light of acetylene torches under blackout curtains. Rumors spread that she could take a dozen torpedo hits and still sail home. Admirals boasted she would restore Japan's prestige, a rebirth of naval supremacy. But beneath the bravado, even the engineers whispered their doubts. "She's too heavy," one designer said quietly, "and her armor sits high. If she floods below, she'll roll." The words were ignored. The irony was cruel. The same armor meant to protect China would also doom her. Her massive weight required compromises. To balance her enormous superluxury, the ship's lower compartments were filled with machinery, pipes, and wiring that cut through her watertight bulkheads, creating hidden flood paths. Many of these compartments were never fully pressure tested. Her armor made her resilient from above, but vulnerable from below. If torpedoes struck beneath the belt, the damage would spread faster than any pump could contain. But no one wanted to hear that. By 1944, Japan's admirals were gambling everything on illusion. The war had turned into a battle of numbers, and Japan was losing badly. America could replace losses overnight. Japan could not, so the Imperial Navy began to think symbolically. If they could not outproduce the enemy, they would out-inspire them. China became the embodiment of that hope and that delusion. Her construction was rushed at every turn. Welding seams were sealed while still hot, cooling unevenly. Electrical cables were laid hastily, sometimes spliced by hand. Whole sections of the hull remained unfinished when officials ordered the paint applied. Deadlines were political now, not technical. When one inspector warned that the bulkhead doors weren't watertight, he was told, "She's armored. She won't need them." By autumn, Chinano's gleaming hull dominated the docks like a monument. She was awe-inspiring, a symbol of human ambition wrapped in steel. Yet under that armor was a ship that had never completed a single watertight test, never run full-speed trials, and never fired a weapon in anger. She looked indestructible, but the truth ran deeper. Strength without integrity is an illusion, and the Shinano was built on illusion. Her armor made her a myth before she ever touched open water. Soon that myth would meet reality in the dark waters south of Japan, where a single submarine waited to challenge everything Japan believed about power, protection, and pride. By the fall of 1944, the war had turned into a slow-motion collapse for Japan. The air above Tokyo trembled daily with the drone of B-29 bombers. Oil reserves were vanishing. Convoys were being slaughtered in the South China Sea. And even Japan's once mighty navy was running on fumes. The Admiralty knew that the empire could no longer win by tactics or numbers, only by spectacle. The order came down. Shinano must sail, finished or not. In the dry dock at Yokosuka, the world's largest aircraft carrier loomed like an unfinished cathedral. Her hull gleamed under floodlights, her decks still smelling of primer and oil. Inside, cables hung loose. Watertight doors were missing handles, and bulkheads remained half-sealed. Crews still hammered, painted, and welded as officers paced the catwalks, urging them to work faster. Many of the shipwrights knew it was madness. One engineer was overheard saying, "She's not ready to fight the Americans. She's not even ready to fight the sea." But fear, not reason, steered Japan's decisions. American reconnaissance planes had already photographed Yokosuka, and commanders warned that a single bombing raid could destroy Shinano before she ever left port. To the Naval Ministry, that would be an unbearable humiliation. The solution: send her to Kure Naval Base for final completion, even if she wasn't ready. The risk of sailing unfinished was considered less shameful than being caught in harbor. At meetings in Tokyo, safety warnings were brushed aside. When an inspector insisted that the carrier's watertight bulkheads had never been tested, an admiral famously replied, "She is armored. She will not need them." Pride had become policy. The Shinano was no longer just a warship. She was propaganda made of steel. To delay her departure was to admit weakness, and weakness was forbidden. On November 28, 1944, the night before departure, Yokosuka was cloaked in blackout. No lights, no signals, no sound except the hiss of torches and the hammering of rivets. Workers moved across her decks like ghosts, sealing gaps with tar and makeshift plates. Some wept quietly as they worked, knowing they were sending an unfinished giant into dangerous seas. "We built her too fast," one said. Another replied, "No, we built her too late." At 6:00 p.m., the order came. The ship's engines rumbled to life, deep and hesitant, as if the steel itself was reluctant to move. Dock workers gathered along the pier in silence, cigarettes glowing faintly in the dark, watching as 70,000 tons of steel began to glide away. Her escort destroyers, Ishokaze, Hamakaze, and Yukaze, fell into formation behind her, their crews unaware of what they were truly guarding. As the massive hull slid into the open water, her wake shimmered under the moonlight. From shore, she looked invincible. Inside, she was still a construction site. Half her crew were yard workers and engineers, sleeping beside crates of tools. Pumps, radios, and sensors were untested. Some compartments still flooded, if hoses leaked. And yet, in that moment, Japan celebrated her departure as a victory. Proof that the empire still breathed. But beneath the waves, fate was already moving. South of Japan, an American submarine USS Archerfish prowled the dark waters, hunting for a target worthy of its torpedoes. Her captain didn't know it yet, but the ocean was about to deliver him one. The night sea stretched endlessly, smooth as glass beneath a veiled moon. At precisely 6:00 p.m. on November 28, 1944, the Shinano left Yokosuka under radio silence. Her engines throbbed deep and steady as three destroyers, Izakaze, Hamakaze, and Yukikaze, took formation around her. The ship's lights were dimmed to slits. No pings, no transmissions, only the sound of waves breaking against armor. Captain Toshio Abe, a veteran of the carrier Shokaku, stood on the bridge, watching the dark horizon. He knew the risks. He had seen carriers die quickly before, but tonight he commanded Japan's last symbol of power, the largest warship ever built. He told his men, "We must reach core at all costs." None of them knew how literal those words would become. Below decks, the atmosphere was strange. The ship was alive, but unfinished. Corridors echoed with hammering and the buzz of welders. 1/3 of those aboard weren't sailors at all. They were shipyard workers, still installing equipment as Shinano steamed into open water. Temporary lights dangled from the ceilings. Exposed wiring sparked underfoot. The watertight doors had never been tested. The pumps barely run once, yet morale was forced. "She's unsinkable," one officer said. Abe gave a faint nod, but said nothing. He had heard the same claim before about ships, now resting on the ocean floor. To the men on deck, the voyage felt calm. But miles away, the calm hid an observer. Beneath the black water moved USS Archerfish, commanded by Commander Joseph Enrich, a patient submariner with something to prove. He had been criticized once for caution. This mission was his redemption. At 8:48 p.m., his radar operator spotted a massive echo. Fast, steady, enormous. Enright's heart pounded. "That's no convoy," he muttered. "That's something big." Through his periscope, a faint shadow crossed the moonlit horizon. An outline too long for any destroyer. "We found her," he whispered. For 6 hours, Archerfish shadowed the target at a distance, mirroring every turn. The submarine crew whispered over dials, sweat beading despite the chill. Above them, Shinano sailed blind, unaware that death was pacing her silently, just beneath the surface. At 300 a.m., after nearly 6 hours of shadowing, Commander 8 knew his moment had come. The target ahead, massive, steady, gliding through the darkness, had turned broadside. The sea was calm, the moon half-shrouded. Through his periscope, Knight saw the impossible. The silhouette stretched beyond the lens's field of view. "That's no tanker," he whispered. "That's a carrier." In the control room of the USS Archer Fish, red lights glowed over tense faces. Every sound mattered. The click of a stopwatch, the whisper of bearings, the low hum of the propellers. The sub moved into firing position at 800 yards. A perfect intercept. Enright exhaled once and gave the order. "Stand by." Tubes 1 through 6. Fire. 6 torpedoes shot into the dark, white trails slicing across the black water. The crew held their breath. Then came the count. 30 seconds, 45. And the ocean erupted. 4 detonations boomed in quick succession. Deep, thunderous, final. The Archer Fish trembled from the shockwave. Men clutched the bulkheads, listening as the reverberations rolled through the hull. Then silence. No counterattack. No depth charges. Enright stared at the sonar operator. "Any screws?" he asked. "Negative," came the answer. The escorts hadn't reacted. They didn't even know where the attack had come from. 200 faft above, the Shinano reeled like a wounded beast. 4 torpedoes had struck her starboard side below the armored belt, exactly where she was weakest. In the boiler rooms, steel plates buckled. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes. Men were thrown from bunks as alarms blared through half-installed speakers. Captain Abe rushed to the bridge as the ship began listing fifth degree. "Shield all compartments!" he shouted, but the command echoed through dead-voiced tubes. Many crews never heard it. Pumps would, then sputtered to silence as Cedar shorted their motors. The crew didn't yet know what hit them. Some believed it was an internal explosion. Others thought a mine. The destroyers circling in the dark flashed searchlights, scanning for shadows that weren't there. On the Archer Fish, Enright ordered a deep dive to 350 faft. The submarine descended into blackness, running silent. He listened through the hydrophones to the distant groans of twisting steel above. After years of doubt, he had just written his redemption. With 6 torpedoes and 1 perfect shot inside the Shinano, chaos erupted. Water rushed through corridors like a living thing, slamming hatches and swallowing compartments faster than damage crews could react. Men shouted over the roar, slipping on oil-slick floors as emergency lights flickered. The ship's great engines still churned, forcing seawater deeper into the wounded hull. Captain Abe gripped the bridge railing and ordered full speed toward the coast. "We'll reach shallow water before dawn," he barked. His officers obeyed, but the order sealed their fate. The increased speed widened the ruptures, turning leaks into floods. Below decks, the engineers fought a losing battle. The pumps, never fully calibrated, failed within minutes. Sailors formed human chains, hauling planks, mattresses, and tools to plug holes. They worked by lantern light, coughing through steam and smoke. Every patch they made burst under pressure. A petty officer jammed his wrench into a pipe to stem the flow, only to be knocked aside by a burst of scalding water. The compartment filled waist-deep in seconds. "Shield it!" shouted the chief engineer, and the steel door clanged shut, trapping 6 men inside. By 400 a.m., the list had worsened to 10 degrees. Pumps ran manually, men turning hand cranks until their palms bled. The smell of oil, salt, and hot metal hung heavy. In the ammunition holds, Cedar hissed against live shells. Sparks from shorted wires flashed along the ceiling like lightning. Above them, the massive flight deck groaned and flexed as the ship twisted under her own weight. The destroyers nearby reported no enemy contact. To them, Shinano still looked stable. Her size made her wounds invisible. They flashed signal lamps. "Are you hit?" The reply came quickly. "Flooding controlled." It was a lie. Below, the damage control officers knew the truth. The carrier was bleeding to death from the inside. At 4:30 a.m., power flickered again. Emergency generators failed, plunging the corridors into darkness. The men could hear the deep metallic moan of the hull, bending under stress. Captain Abe stood on the bridge, drenched in sweat, staring into the dark sea ahead. "We will hold," he muttered. But even as he said it, the list increased to 15 breeze. The ocean was winning, and every man aboard could feel it. By 5:30 a.m., the great carrier's agony deepened. The list reached 20 degrees and water, poured through half, sealed bulkheads faster than any crew could fight. Men crawled along tilted decks, gripping handrails slick with oil. Ammunition carts rolled free, crashing into bulkheads. The destroyers flashed frantic signals, asking if the flagship needed help, but Captain Abe refused to admit defeat. "We will not shame the Navy," he ordered. He was still chasing the shore he could no longer reach. Below, the reality was brutal. Entire compartments had vanished beneath the rising flood. The engine rooms glowed red with emergency lamps, steam hissing from broken pipes. Sailors sloshed through waist-deep water, passing buckets by hand in a hopeless ritual. One officer begged a flood counterbalance tanks to correct the list. Abe hesitated. Every move risked more imbalance. "Hold steady," he said, but steadiness was impossible. The Shinano, once Japan's pride, now groaned like a dying creature. By 6:00 a.m., the power failed for the last time. The bridge fell silent, lit only by the gray dawn outside. The carrier now leaned at 25 degrees, her deck tilting toward the sea. Abe ordered the destroyers to take on survivors, but few dared approach. The list made boarding impossible. "Abandon ship," he finally whispered, though no one wanted to move. Officers saluted before jumping into the churning water below. Minutes later, the unthinkable happened. The massive hull rolled further, decks vanishing beneath the waves. The Shinano capsized slowly, her bow lifting skyward as the ocean swallowed her stern. Air roared through the vents like thunder. At 10:57 a.m., the unsinkable carrier slipped beneath the surface, taking over 400 souls with her. Captain Abe went down with his ship, standing on the bridge as it disappeared. The destroyers circled the bubbling patch of sea where she had vanished, stunned into silence. In less than 7 hours, the largest warship in history had drowned, sunk before she ever saw battle. The sea was calm again by noon, as if nothing had happened. Oil spread across the surface in long rainbow streaks. Wooden planks, life vests, and twisted metal drifted silently on the tide. Survivors clung to debris, their faces blackened with soot and salt, calling weakly for help. The 3 destroyers moved among them, throwing down ropes and nets, pulling men from the freezing water. Many were barefoot, their uniforms torn, their eyes empty. Out of the 400 men who had sailed on the Shinano, fewer than 100 survived. When the survivors reached Kerr Naval Base, they were ordered into isolation. Their clothes were burned, their statements recorded, and their silence demanded. They were told never to speak of the ship again. Not to friends, not to family, not even to other sailors. The Shinano, Japan's greatest symbol of pride, was erased from official records. No public announcement, no newspaper report, not even a whisper reached the Japanese people. To them she had never existed. Meanwhile, deep beneath the waves, the USS Archerfish slipped away unnoticed. Commander Joseph Enright, unaware of what he had just accomplished, recorded in his log, "Target destroyed. Large tanker or carrier, probable total loss." He would not learn the truth until after the war ended. Only in 1945, when American intelligence examined captured Japanese archives, did they discover the magnitude of his victory. The Archerfish had sunk Shinano, the largest warship ever built, and the largest ever destroyed by a submarine. In the months that followed, Japan's empire continued to crumble. The loss of Shinano was hidden, but its meaning echoed quietly through the ranks of officers who knew. Pride had built her, haste had doomed her, and denial had buried her. She had lasted just 17 hours at sea, a monument to the illusion of invincibility. Beneath 4,000 aft of water off Honshu, she still rests, a rusted tomb to the cost of arrogance. In the end, the ocean doesn't respect pride or steel or symbols. It only remembers what floats and what